Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Data Unchained. I'm your host, Molly Presley. Before we introduce today's guest, let me talk a little bit about what Data Unchained is about. Our podcast covers the topic of data has become increasingly decentralized, scattered across edge locations, data centers, clouds, devices. And while this is really a great innovation in our ability to have a data-driven world, it also creates interesting obstacles for organizations who are trying to harness the information in that data. It can create security concerns, and it can overall, from a corporate compliance perspective, create concerns from the legal side of the business. So in Data Unchained, we talk about both the opportunities that are buried within that data, some of the technologies that are available, and solutions that will help you in a world where your data is very decentralized. So today, our guest is Chris Mohr. He is the president of the Software and Information Industry Association, SIIA for short. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So before we start to jump into tech and industry associations and standards and such, tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe outside of work. What are your big focuses when you're not doing technology?
Well, I have one son in college, a daughter who is going into her senior year of high school. And so that outside of that, pretty focused on that right now. And, you know, in my spare time, I have, the definition of a hobby is something where, interest is inversely proportional to talent. And so for me, that's bike riding. I absolutely love it. And so
road bike, dirt bike, mountain bike?
Road bike. Okay. Yeah, I do enjoy the mountain biking. I think it's really fun. It's just come to it a bit late. So my risk tolerance is probably not right. Or rather, I'd be more...
Your interest in breaking bones and
exactly.
scraping yourself up is lower than maybe it was in your 20s.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'd probably start writing checks that my body's not going to cash. So I'm going to stay on the road.
I hear you. I have, as people can see in my background, I have horses, and I've increasingly been I've broken 2 bones in the last year, and I'm less inclined to ride the crazies. So yeah. I'm with you there. All right, cool. So let's talk about what is SIIA. What is the organization? What are you looking to address with the group?
Sure. We are a trade association of, depending on the day, about 370 companies or so, all of whom are engaged in the business of information. And our mission is, what we do is we provide a forum for them and advocate for an ecosystem that enables creation, dissemination, and productive use. And so we are, let me unpack that a little bit, because what has happened over the course of the last, probably starting in the late 1990s, but really that has really accelerated, even in the last year, is that the information is becoming increasingly sold as a service. And when I started, I'm a recovering lawyer, and I started doing a lot of copyright work. And at that time, my clients all pretty much sold things by the copy. So there were very narrow exceptions to this, right? I mean, if you think of market data was the one exception. So that was sold, as a service, the ticker tape. If you've ever seen that, I'm dating myself,
sure,
but if you've ever seen that,
that absolutely makes sense.
The bubble in movies.
Streaming across your screen.
Right.
Yep.
Screaming across your screen or coming out of one of those glass bubbles, right? But the value is evanescent, right? Real time. And now that it started first with databases and then went to software, and now it's music and movies. All of this content is now being sold as a service. And when that happens, there's a whole nother ecosystem of information that is generated that didn't exist before. That's all new. And then throw AI on top of that. So what we are doing, we provide a place where our members can talk about that. I mean, part strategy, part group therapy. And we also advocate in the policy space for an environment that allows them to harness these technologies and advance their mission.
So tell us a little bit about your members. Are they largely vendors providing software or solutions as a service? Is it end customers? Is it the governments themselves?
We have essentially three divisions. So one division deals in financial information, specifically market data. Another division is business-to-business media. And then we have people who are really just here for policy and our advocacy work. And for them, that sort of sits over the top of, in some senses, of those groups. And so we will take positions generally that advance the interests of all of our members. And so, for example, one of the things we do not do is we do not take positions. It's a bit counterintuitive, but we don't take positions or policy positions around market data. So we'll take policy positions around AI more generally, but we will not, tell the SEC that we think it's a good idea to do X or Y with respect to our members. That's not something we engage in.
You mentioned AI, which is hard to have any conversation today, no matter what you do, without talking about AI. But how is it influencing your space right now? What is the top areas where it's kind of poking its head up on neat?
It ranges. I mean, the list is long. Just starting an IP, right? There are the copyright and name, image, and likeness issues. Then for our platform members, we have issues around content moderation. There is a whole separate work stream around the use of AI in education, which is something we are quite deep in. There are also pretty significant implications for consumer privacy, which we're also very involved in. So we have a broad. We do a lot of the IT, and I'll put those in scare quotes, like the information technology issues, but we do them from the data side.
Lots of questions. It seems like an interesting and really volatile space potentially on both sides of the equation. But tell us, this is a group where you said it could be group therapy, a place to talk about the issues, but then you also advocate for actual regulation. How do you work with the federal government? Where do things move from recommendation to action?
I'm going to give you an accurate but useless answer, and that is it depends. So it comes in two ways. One, the most concrete way it can happen, and this is largely true much more in the states than in the federal government, for example, but it still can happen in the federal government, right? And I would call this, again, dating myself probably, but this is like legislation by 60 Minutes. There's a story. It elicits a response. There's an immediate sort of, there ought to be a law. And then something starts moving, good or bad, it starts moving, right? That's one source. Another way that it happens is, particularly with a new technology, the government, an institution, and this has happened with AI, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, did some great work around risk-based frameworks. And then that got developed. And that's like, let's call that, if you think of it as a stack of, shrinking mixing bowls, right? The teeny tiny one that you put like a tablespoon of salt in, that's the actual legislation or regulation. But there's a whole lot of plates in between there. So from there, you got the NIST standard. Then you've got maybe an EO that comes in on top of it that directs the agencies to start looking into it. And then the agencies have a study process. And gradually, these things are getting more and more specific, right? And then you get to an NPRM, a notice of proposed rulemaking, where they're actually going to change something in terms of how they operate. And so we would engage, we can engage at any one of those places depending on, the issue and what other buildings might be burning at a given time.
I was going to ask that. Do you just get the process started and then it takes the path it takes? But it sounds like you can advise or participate at different phases in that process, which is pretty interesting. What is a recent one that you've been involved in?
A few. So AI generally, we've been very supportive of the development of risk-based frameworks around regulation. Again, this is all, when you think about sort of the different level of abstractions that these things play out at, right? That's a really big one because you don't want your Spotify algorithm getting treated the same way as something that regulates a pacemaker.
Okay, makes sense.
That makes sense. And it's simple, but it becomes it gets complicated because with a new technology, there's often an instinctive desire to regulate it. And we have found institutionally, not me personally, but institutionally, we've been at this for, coming up on 40 years, which is a long time for a technology association. It's really important that these issues be approached from a technologically neutral standpoint. Fraud's still fraud, even if you use AI to do it. And so, the key there in sort of advising these regulators is, what is it about AI that's special that the initial laws don't cover? And a lot of times the answer will be nothing. But if there is something, then, you have to calibrate whatever that regulation is appropriately.
So is your target to, obviously there's the regulation bit we've been talking about,
Sure.
But do you also advise companies in the same way, with all these learnings, like, I'm a Fortune 500 CIO and I need to keep pace with all these regulations and potential landmines and whatnot. Do you work at that level as well?
Yeah, I mean, part of what we do is we provide, a form of intelligence to our member companies. If it's a really big company, I mean, we have some very large corporate members. Then that intel gets provided to their government affairs departments and the people who track it. And for the smaller ones, it might filter into their general counsel's office or an operations person, and we'll tell them. We will tell them what's going on in the issue areas we're covering. We'll tell them about the meetings with policymakers we have. We have calls where we advise them of kind of what we expect to see coming and so on and so forth in our different kind of areas of focus.
Seems like a really valuable community. I would imagine in this world that's super fast paced right now. What are the top, maybe 3 topics right now that you're focused on? I imagine AI is one of them, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, AI is definitely one. I mean, I would say what we're focused on right now, I would say privacy is a big deal. Privacy is a very big deal.
Is that a patient? Like, when I think of privacy, I think about medical HIPAA patient privacy. Is that what you're thinking, or is it something?
No, that's a very good question. We have right now we have a very unique strategy around sort of HIPAA covered data. We don't do that.
Okay, it's a very, very specific industry,
right?
A massive number of regulations and experts in it. For sure,
that's exactly right. I mean, we have but in consumer, but we do have an interest in consumer privacy more broadly. One of our real areas of focus, again, it goes to this ecosystem. There's a whole bunch of information that is used in ways that people take completely for granted. So let me give you an obvious example, right? When you make a purchase at Amazon and you want to send it to your house, right? If you're suddenly, let's say I live in the Washington area, if I'm suddenly shipping a bunch of TVs to Lithuania or Slovakia, they should have questions. That's never shown up. How do they know that? They query databases, et cetera, and that gets provided. And so that's a simple example of a fraud check. There is a whole raft of businesses that operate in that space. And it's all around publicly available information, stuff that's in the public domain, public records. And so we have been very active in, one, making policymakers aware of the value of this stuff. I mean, it's not just, Amazon deliveries. It's also anti-terrorism and money laundering and a whole bunch of other stuff. And so it's important that they know that. And the other part of it is a lot of this activity is First Amendment protected. And so we've been very, very active in ensuring that our friends in Congress and in the states are aware of those limits on legislative power.
When you think about privacy, we also talked about some copyright lawsuits that you've been involved in recently. Does that fit in that area as well? I mean, are we talking AI? Are we talking privacy? What kind of key trend is that touching on?
The copyright issues, I would put those in a different bucket for privacy. And this for me is, this for me is a really fun issue personally, but professionally it's delicate because we have members on both sides of this. So essentially, the way at issue in those cases is when these models were trained on the open internet, what, if any, obligation does the model developer have to compensate the content creators whose stuff is incorporated? And that is, and the answer to that, again, technically accurate but practically useless, is that it probably depends, because the way these cases develop, look, the way the copyright law works is you make a copy of something that triggers 90% of the time, that will trigger an analysis of defenses. And so what happens most often, and you see this in news articles, is the defense most often asserted is fair use, which is fact specific and takes a long time to develop a record. There are 4 statutory factors. I'm not going to get into it, but the details. But the general idea is it's a rule of reason. Is what in light of the statute's purposes, is what the defendant did with the copyright owner's work reasonable? And there's a bunch of different ways. There are a bunch of different legal tests that have been developed over a couple hundred years. This is very much a common law kind of thing. And so that's actually really important and really good, because what it means is that all of these different nuances are going to be fleshed out through the litigation process. This is, now I don't know how many congressional hearings you might have watched, but 5-minute rounds of questioning are usually not the best way to get to the bottom of much of anything.
Yeah, for sure.
So
it's much more complex.
It's more complicated. So for us, our position is that right now, the courts are the best place to figure all these things out. And then when those decisions come out, they may expose systemic problems that will require legislative addressing, right? But we're not there yet. Let the process play out.
I think that's a really fascinating thing. And in my company where I work, we are a lot of the infrastructure that the language models were originally trained on.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a space that I'm active in and interested in. But we're just a data layer. We don't have much control over how the data gets used. That is at the language model developers level. But I think about most of these original models were developed on publicly available information.
Right.
It was on the internet, they trained with it, and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And what you're saying is they could be potentially liable for data that they trained with that was sitting on the public internet, saying a song, a video, that type of thing. Is that where this legislation is occurring right now?
Well, that's exactly the issue in the litigation. That's right.
Okay. It's interesting.
So that is exactly the issue in the litigation. And then, if these come out, if the decisions come out a certain way, then yeah, there could be liability for the AI developers.
How long will it take to proceed? I mean, that may be saying, predict the future, which no one can do. But is this we'll have some policy around this or some decisions in the next few months? Is it going to take years to wrangle its way through?
It's going to take years. It's going to take a couple of years, probably, at least another 2, I would think, to get a Supreme Court decision on this, right? Which will really be the last word. There have been a variety of decisions, in the Meta litigation, in the Anthropic litigation, that have kind of begun to, I guess, refine the issues that are going to go upstairs. In other words, they figured out, to think about it, they figured out what happened. And then, the factual part is done. They figured out what happened, what more or less, what was copied. And now they're arguing about, all right, well, what's the right rule to apply here? How do all of these cases over the last several, over the last couple of centuries, like how do they influence this and how it should be resolved? And that's sort of where the action is.
For people who aren't recovering lawyers and are working in this space, like I'm a recovering biochemist, I don't know, as much about how you need to prepare for the readiness in this area. So policies are working their way through the courts. There's some directional kind of the way the winds are blowing, but how do people at the corporate level focus on their readiness to make sure that they're making the right decisions now where there's not policy in place yet?
So I think there are, that's a really good question. I think it varies a lot. The most practical thing that I've seen is really it's just kind of reps and warranties. So in other words, like from a pure business perspective, right? And you saw this early on where OpenAI did this, I think, fairly early on. They're not a member of ours, but they basically said with Microsoft behind them is like, hey, if you get sued for copyright infringement, for example, we'll indemnify you.
Okay.
So I think I can probably say without getting in trouble that both the plaintiffs and defendants are probably equally convinced that they're correct.
Sure. And because this is new territory, and when there isn't, even today, how data is being used by these language models is different when it was trained 3 years ago. So, I mean, what was happening when they were originally trained is different too. I'm sure it's a very difficult place to find what's right and wrong. And it's just
these are tough. These are hard. These are hard cases. A lot of law school exams on AI last year, I bet, and copyright courses. I would be willing to bet.
There are. So, if you're thinking about how an organization, whether it's a vendor, it's a public sector, or it's a customer, want to take advantage of your group, is it being a member? Are there work groups? Are there podcasts where you wrap up some of these results? How can people best engage and leverage what seems like some really incredibly valuable work?
So there's, it kind of depends on what you want. For example, if you are a financial information professional, I think, our Financial Information Services Division, FISD, is a great place for you if you want to learn about the market data ecosystem, which is very much its own, it's got its own language and its own, ebbs and flows and so forth. If you are in the business-to-business media space, we have a place for you. In our media division. If you, on the other hand, if you are interested, if what you are looking to do is kind of stay on top of of all of these different breaking developments in policy, which do bleed over into the operating divisions, depending on the level of interest. If what you really want is kind of, I need to know what's going on because some of this stuff might affect my business. If, for example, Section 230 were to be changed, I couldn't run a platform anymore, right? I couldn't.
And what is Section 230?
So Section 230 is the statute that says I, as a platform, am not liable for somebody else's speech. So if I go around, if somebody goes around, puts up a YouTube video, saying terrible things, saying bad things, false defamatory things, for example, about me, YouTube is never in trouble for that, right? The person who made those comments is on the hook,
right?
Right,
makes sense.
And that is, that is a very, very, that is a critical piece of the internet. It's one of the reasons that our tech industry is where it is in relation to the rest of the world. Because they had a safe space to innovate.
It makes sense. I'm not sure this is a place to even unpack, but is that true for social media sites too? It seems like especially
Absolutely.
Elon Musk with X will get involved. And there was, go back during the campaign, a lot of, should this be removed or not? Is that on the platform's job or not? When it's dangerous content or whatever it is.
And that's exactly, okay. So what Section 230 protect? Look, both of those decisions have a statutory and a constitutional component. In other words, let's take Twitter, which is easy, or I'm sorry, X, not a member. So that's easy, right? Somebody says something that's harmful. As a publisher, Twitter has every right to decide what kind of platform do they want to run, right? Do I want this kind of content? Well, if I want advertisers, like, do I want a particular kind of content? If you have like a lot of adult content, are you going to get a lot of mainstream brands? Probably not. Right? If you want something, there are plenty. If you have a certain type of, if your content's slanted too much towards one particular political view, you're going to lose advertisers. You're going to lose attention, right? How you decide to do that, who you want to be as a company, that's First Amendment protected. There's a separate level over that, which is Section 230, which says, one, you can't be liable for bad things that other people do on your platform outside of, as long as they're speaking, not other things. But if you can't be treated as if you said it.
Gotcha.
Right. That's the bottom line for that. And if you are doing things, we're not going to punish Good Samaritans. So if there are things like CSAM, which is, kid-related obscenity, right? If you have that on your platform and you are out, you can actively go and look to take that stuff down, which all of our members do. Nobody wants that stuff. Right. They don't want anybody to see it, but people still will try to post it. That does not mean that you suddenly became the publisher of everything else that's on your platform. Okay. Those two things, they work together, to protect the ability of these firms, both, to create their own communities and to innovate. Okay.
And to be good Samaritans where they choose to be.
Right.
Makes sense. So I'm personally very interested in checking out some of the work groups and communities in SIIA. I'm going to look at it myself, but where do you get started? Is it just your homepage? Are there certain places if you want to see the different kind of focus areas and figure out what's right for you? I'm thinking, where would you point the listeners from this show who want to learn some more?
Yeah, I mean, easiest place is, I'd have them just kind of poke around the website. If they're interested in policy, I'd have them poke around the policy page. If you're interested in FISD or media, then poke around those pages.
Okay. And is it SIIA.org or what is the website?
We're a .net.
.net. Okay, so SIIA.net. And then do you have any kind of newsletters or just kind of periodic updates that people can subscribe to?
A couple of things. I mean, we did just start a podcast called The Business of Information, which is not a bad way to get introduced to the different kinds of things that our members do and the kinds of issues we cover. So,
interesting. Are you the host of that, or are you a periodic guest?
No, I'm not a guest yet. Boy, I'll bet some people would have some fun with that. I am hosting it for now anyway. We've had people from our EdTech community talk about education and AI. We've had the chair of the House subcommittee on IP talk about kind of the legislative agenda for the next year and what he expects to see in that space around patents and copyrights and name, image, and likeness. We've had folks from the market data industry talking to us about alt data and compliance, and we're going to be speaking with investors in the business-to-business media space about the kind of their careers and the M&A outlook for the next couple of in the next short, medium term, and so forth.
Okay,
it's a good way to get a flavor for the different things that our members do.
That sounds fun. We'll make sure in the show notes to include a link to where to find that podcast, as well as just to the homepage. Mm-hmm. Chris, it's been really great having you on the show. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave our audience with? Maybe some of the next things that you see that might be hitting your agenda or legislative agenda that people should have kind of in the back of their heads? I mean, I think one of the things that folks should be getting a handle on is just how quickly this space is changing. Just, if you think about
not only how much better these tools have gotten, but just in how, I mean, at least for me, and this is more from the operations side than the policy side. If you looked at a list of, the top 10 apps to do X, Y, or Z from 6 months ago, they're now different, right? The pecking orders definitely changes, and the things they can do, from low code to no code has already shifted quite a bit. So I think, the advice I would give is, if you're not partnering with an organization like ours, you probably should be talking to somebody about what's coming and how you can use it. Because I think, the potential of this technology is genuinely transformational.
Yeah, I saw a stat just the other day. I don't remember where it was, but something like the Wall Street Journal or something like that,
right,
that the pace of change, where even a year ago we were saying it took 10 months to change what used to take 10 years, that now that's even compressed down to like closer to a month. I mean, it's just staggering that, the innovation in technology is changing faster than people are able to decide how to use it, and certainly how to control or, make policies around it. So
right,
how to operate in this environment where pace of change isn't going to change. It takes new tools, right?
Yep.
And I think organizations like yours are a great place for folks to at least keep abreast of the big topics that they should have on their minds.
We try.
Well, Chris, thank you for joining the show. This was super interesting. I will check out your podcast and be using some of that output to keep abreast of what's going on in my world as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Molly.
Thanks for listening to Data Unchained, powered by Hammerspace. To learn more, visit hammerspace.com. If you have a guest you would like to hear on the show, email me at molly@hammerspace.com.